Can we turn this cheap Snow White Playline doll into a budget version of the official live-action collector's doll? Hello everyone, welcome to my channel where I customize Barbies and other fashion dolls. Today I'm doing my second Disney Princess custom because the official Mattel doll for the Disney Snow White movie just released. And some people, that's me, I'm some people, were kind of disappointed that there's only a $75 collector's doll and no Playline dolls. But there is an $18 Playline animated Disney Store version. So I got this one instead. Let's see if we can repaint her face to make her look like Rachel Zegler. The doll has plastic-free packaging and molded on eyelids. Those are going to be a problem when doing the repaint. For $18, I think this doll is really great value for money. There's also a second Disney Store version priced at $30, sort of a deluxe version. It also comes with plastic-free packaging and with a few accessories that aren't included in the cheaper version. There's an apple pie, a bunny, and a bird. And also a basket of apples that are molded in and can't be removed. The deluxe version comes with a plastic bow, which I'm personally not a big fan of. I prefer the basic version's fabric bow. But as the deluxe version comes with an extra outfit and interchangeable headband, I'm assuming they chose the plastic bow as it can be removed easier. Both dolls have heavily glued hair, which I personally don't mind, as I do like the overall look of the hairstyles. Regarding the dresses, I also kind of prefer the basic version's dress, as in my opinion it looks a bit more movie accurate than the other one. When it comes to the bodies themselves, they are very similar in height and skin tone, but the deluxe one has a bit more details and curves, especially on the arms and legs. However, as a result, the legs aren't as bendable as the legs of the basic version. Initially, I did consider using one of these two bodies for my custom Snow White, but after seeing how limited their articulation is, I decided to go with a Barbie made-to-move body instead. For a live-action Rachel Zegler doll, I also feel like a made-to-move body will give more realistic proportions, as the Disney Store bodies are meant to look more cartoonish. I'm thinking the tennis player should make a good body donor, because her skin tone isn't too far off from the Snow White head. It's a little more tanned and has a more saturated pinkish tone opposed to the Disney Store dolls, which I think will actually help in creating a bit more realism. And I can adjust the head's color using soft pastels when doing the repaint. Before starting the repaint, I need to remove the doll's head. Looks like my kid Toggy has decided to help with the task. As I don't own a hairdryer and can't find my heat gun, I boil some water, protect the doll with a small plastic bag, and let the vinyl warm up for a few minutes. I'm not great at removing dolls' heads, and what's that? I've never seen a neck pack like this one before, and as I start to pull the head away from the body, it sort of starts stretching out. At this point, I should probably have tried a different approach, but as I'm getting more and more frustrated, I'm just pulling harder, trying to wiggle the upper part of the pack out of the neck hole. Yeah, not the best idea. It rips and I spent a long time trying to get the neck pack out of the doll's head using some tweezers. And then I spent even more time trying to fix her hair that got totally messed up in the process. For the made-to-move body, the whole head removal process works a lot smoother. I tried placing the Snow White doll on its new body to see if I need to make any adjustments to the head or the neck pack, but it fits surprisingly well. I still wouldn't skip this step. I did that in the past and got really stressed out when the already painted head wouldn't fit its new body and the sealant would start cracking from squishing the vinyl too much. I'm now protecting the doll's hair from the sealant. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know that I usually do this by attaching small plastic bags onto the head with tape. I used to do it this way because I didn't have any fabric at hand that would be a good fit to cover the doll's hair. But I did order these white doll shirts online, thinking these were Barbie-sized and only afterwards realizing they were meant for American Girl dolls. I'm thinking they'd be perfect as hair covers. I tried attaching the fabric to the doll's head using sewing pins. But obviously I used pins that are too long for this purpose because What is this? I really didn't mean to give her a cheek piercing. I then try cutting the pins at an angle to shorten them, but still keep them somewhat sharp. And this does the job. But I'd still strongly advise you to just get shorter pins instead. I removed the doll's face using pure acetone that I got at a local hardware store. Most paint comes off fairly easy, but due to the heavily molded lips and eyes, it's a bit of a struggle to get rid of the paint that's stuck between the lips and the eyelid creases. I sprayed the doll's face using Citadel Monitorum varnish. Then it's finally time to start drawing. I adjust the skin tone using pink and beige colored soft pastels. I also add blush to the doll's lips using a small brush with trimmed bristles. I find that cutting down the bristles helps the brush take on the soft pastels pigment a lot better. Then I sketch out the doll's features using watercolor pencils. For a light sketch, I use my Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. For defining the lines and strengthening the colors, I use my Derwent Inktense watercolor pencils. I save my progress by adding more layers of sealant, and I end up drawing 3 layers in total. I keep comparing my drawing to photos of Rachel Ziegler and keep adding shadows and highlights to reshape the cartoon face. It helps switching between features and not over-focusing on just the lips or just one eye, for example, so you don't lose track of the bigger picture. Otherwise, you might have one eye perfectly done, but then struggle with the other one, or worse, realize the placement was wrong and having to restart it all over again. Now, I can't stress this enough, but please make sure to use adequate protection for using any type of spray sealant, and also make sure to get the right filters for your mask. I just bought a new one and trusted the supposedly specialized shop assistant's advice on which filter to get, and only realized later on at home that I could fully smell the sealant when spraying. If you can't smell the sealant through the mask, that means something is wrong. If the mask is adjusted correctly so it sits tight on your face, and if you are using the correct filters, there shouldn't be any smell. So please make sure you get a good mask with the correct filters when using spray sealants such as Citadel Monitorum or Mr. Super Clear. For these type of spray sealants, you really only need 2 types of filters. One that filters organic vapors from the solvents in the spray, and one that filters fine mist particles to prevent inhaling tiny droplets. In Europe, the ideal mask would be an A2P3 mask, and from my research it seems that in the US an equivalent would be called OV plus P100, but please double check that to make sure you purchase the correct thing. The shop assistant had sold me an ABEK1 plus P3 filter, which did have the correct filter for the mist particles, but only had an A1 protection from organic vapor, which isn't as strong as the A2 filter. Also, it came with 3 other unnecessary gas filters that I don't even need. From my new research, I learned that these extra filters might reduce the available carbon for the organic vapor filter, rendering it even less effective. So you might be thinking, oh, this filter seems better because it seems to protect me against more types of gases, but really, it might have the opposite effect because by protecting against more things, it will be less effective against specific things. But back to the doll's face. Even though the doll's huge eyelids do look beautiful, they aren't very realistic for the live-action doll. I used dark pencils to seemingly lower the crease and give them a smaller appearance. For the lips, I realized too late that I had drawn them on too small, following the molded cartoon lips instead of creating a new shape. When I finally realized the issue and widened the shape, the teeth that are showing between the lips end up being way too small for the bigger mouth. As white watercolor pencils on top of darker ones don't tend to work very well, I decided to draw on the teeth with white acrylic paint instead. Much better. Maybe you've heard the art advice that you should never paint with unmixed black paint straight out of the tube. The same goes for black watercolor pencils. In most cases, using a dark brown instead can lead to a much more natural result. With my Faber-Castell pencils, the issue was that my darkest shade of brown, the Walnut Brown 177, wasn't really dark enough. It would take many layers to show up, so I'd often grow impatient and ended up using the black instead, especially for lashes and pupils. But I never really liked how that ended up looking. Now I've just purchased the Derwent Inktense watercolor pencils, as they show up better than the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. What also helps is that for the Derwent pencils, my darkest shade of brown, which is called Bark 2000, is darker than the Albrecht Dürer Walnut Brown. So for this doll, I did not use any black at all. I only used the Bark 2000 Inktense pencil and can't believe what a difference that makes. I really love how much more cohesive and natural the end result looks due to this change. The good thing is, the Inktense pencils can still be erased, provided that you didn't seal them yet. I felt like the dolls somehow didn't really look like Rachel Ziegler, and after taking a small break and looking at photos of the actress, I found that the issue were the doll's eyes. I raised the waterline so I can raise it up a little, and I also bring down the upper lid for more of a squinting look. I feel like this really helps enhance the resemblance with Rachel Ziegler. Then I redefine the eyes and eyebrows, and the first layer is finally ready to be sealed. Usually, for the last 1 or 2 layers, I don't make a lot of changes. I just go over everything to make sure it's not too faded. Especially the soft pastels tend to lose quite a bit of their saturation when being sealed. But the watercolor pencils can also lose some of their contrast, so you just want to go over the highlights and darker details to bring them out a bit more. Sometimes this can feel a little frustrating and like you're not really making a lot of progress, but I promise this will really be worth it in the end. When done correctly, this helps define all the small details and bringing the doll to life. For the doll's dress, I purchased the second-hand Barbie wearing an old Snow White dress off of eBay because it has the red lacing on the front, just like the live-action dress. I also pick out some fabrics in the dress's colors because I'm thinking I might sew on some extra details like the long sleeves. But, spoiler alert, I'll end up using none of the fabric, and I also get away with gluing everything together instead of sewing it. The dress isn't in the best condition, so I get rid of any loose strands and also give it a thorough wash. There's some stains on the skirt I can't get out, but that's not an issue since I'm not interested in the skirt, only the lace top. But this means we need a new skirt. I did purchase this Steffa Lucy Snow White doll for a project where I only want to use her head, so why don't we use her dress to make our live action skirt? The plain top isn't really what I had in mind, but maybe I can combine the Steffa Lucy skirt with the lace top. I carefully detached the lace top from the stained skirt, trying not to cut into the fabric and instead only undoing the seams. It's a bit of a tedious process, but I finally did it. Now all that's left is getting rid of the Defalusi dress's sleeves. I'm out of patience and also I can't get them turned inside out, so I end up chopping them off very nonchalantly. It looks kind of ugly, but they will be hidden underneath the other sleeves, so it doesn't really matter. See? That's already starting to look kind of cute. And you can't see the chopped off sleeves. But I'm not really happy with how the skirt looks. It's kind of long and flat and I'm wanting something a bit shorter and poofier. I remember that I also have the deluxe Disney Store Snow White, and since I'm not very fond of her dress, I'm more than willing to also sacrifice it for this project. I chop off its skirt and try pulling it over the other skirt. Yeah, that won't get us anywhere. But maybe if I put it underneath, like a petticoat? That's already a little poofier, but still too long. I fold up the Defalusi skirt and glue it in place using Fabri-Tac glue. And here we go, skirt problem solved. It doesn't look exactly like the live action skirt, but I'm taking some creative liberties here. While I did want the repainted face to resemble Rachel Ziegler as much as possible, for the outfit and styling I'm not keeping it as strictly. I feel like Disney tends to go for a more simplified modern look with their live action dresses, and I'm thinking a little more glamour couldn't hurt. So this will be more of my own version of the live action dress. Now all that's missing are the sleeves. I know I said that I wanted to learn how to sew, and I did manage some smaller projects like doll socks so far, but for the sleeves I'm a bit lost as to how I'd need to do this. Maybe with a stretchier fabric this would be easier, but with this fabric there's no way I can get functioning and good looking sleeves sewn onto the dress. So I try something else. I cut off the sleeves of the deluxe dress and I try to use them to elongate my current dress's sleeves. They are a bit too poofy, but I cut them open, make them tighter and glue them shut with Fabri-Tac glue. And I think somehow this doesn't look too bad. What do you think? I know my live action Snow White is sort of stuck with this dress, as it won't really be removable, but I haven't planned on changing her outfit anyway. Now she's only missing her socks and shoes and maybe a little accessory, and then it's time for the big reveal. I do have some boxes with doll clothes for upcoming projects, and I remembered that I have some spare socks that should be a perfect fit for my live action Snow White. I know I just said that I learned how to sew doll socks, but these are a little more fancy. I feel like they really bring the whole look together, and if we compare it to a photo of the Rachel Ziegler Snow White, I do think with the socks it's becoming clearer that the dress is supposed to be inspired from the live action version. Now onto the shoes. I'm painting them with acrylic paints, and I'll also be painting the little bird that came with the deluxe version. Since these pieces are tiny, I don't use my Citadel Monitorum sealant as a base, which I later regret. My base coat of Vallejo primer doesn't do much, so I switched to white gesso instead. It ends up a little patchy, but I'm hoping to correct this later on with the paint. I'm in a bit of a hurry, as I want to publish this video before the Snow White movie comes out in theaters, so I don't let the individual paint layers dry long enough. Looking back, this was a bit pointless, and I could have taken the time to do a proper paint job, because as you've probably realized, the movie has released long before this video. I'm terrible at estimating how much time I'll need for certain tasks. I can thank my neurodivergence for that. So I really struggle with deadlines and always end up finishing tasks in a hurry. I think the bird didn't turn out too bad, but for the shoes I really messed up. I realize my matte varnish has gone bad, but end up using it anyway, so the shoe's finish is very uneven. On top of that, I try putting on the shoes when they haven't dried properly, making a huge mess. Now with the red toes, it's giving more Cinderella's stepsister than Snow White, but since she already has to keep on the dress, I guess she'll also have to keep on the shoes to hide her stained socks. I don't have any red ribbon for the shoes, but I do have turquoise ribbon, which I paint with red fabric paint that I got from my local craft store. The painted shoes don't fit on top of the socks, as the fabric and paint have added too much bulk. So I cut off some of the shoes back and fixed them by gluing on the red ribbon. They aren't perfect, but they'll have to do. We can use the remaining ribbon to make a Snow White bow. My live-action Snow White already has a ribbon, as I had used the basic version's head. But I really want to replace the deluxe version's plastic bow so I can keep her as my cartoon Snow White. First, I try making an actual bow, but on such a small scale, it's really hard to make a bow look good, especially since the ribbon is quite stiff from the fabric paint. I try using my fingers and even a comb, but eventually give up and decide to fake the bow, using some more Fabri-Tac glue instead. Now all that's left to do is putting the live-action doll's head onto its body. I can't wait to see the finished result. So, what do you think? Did she end up resembling Rachel Zegler? I know I went way over budget by using an extra dress and a Barbie made-to-move body, so I probably didn't really succeed in making a cheap alternative to the collector's version. But I had so much fun customizing her, and I'm super happy with how she turned out. So honestly, I think it was worth it. Also, if you notice the other Snow White doll behind me on the shelf, yeah, that's a vintage Barbie doll from 1999. I actually wanted to use her for this custom at first, but then I felt bad because I kinda love this doll and I didn't want to ruin her. So, should I destroy her to make a second Snow White custom? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you left a like or a comment, and if you want to see more of my doll transformations, feel free to subscribe. I had to take a break recently due to health issues, but I'm hoping I'll be able to start uploading regularly from now on. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye!